My dear friends in Christ, our good news this morning has been recorded for us by Luke. Each year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the feast of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to the festival custom. When they had completed its days, as they were returning, the boy Jesus remained behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Thinking that he was in the caravan, they journeyed for a day and looked for him among their relatives and their acquaintances. Not finding him, they returned to Jerusalem and searched diligently for the child. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were astounded at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, Son, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been looking for you with great anxiety. He said to them, Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house? They did not understand what he said to them. Jesus went down with them and came to Nazareth, and was obedient to them. And his mother kept all of these things in her heart. Jesus advanced in wisdom and age and favor before God and man. The gospel of Christ. Praise be to you, O Christ. Please be seated. I'm not sure enough could be said about the last couple of days with the Living Nativity and the impact that this little church has had on such an everyone who participated. Even now, Marcus can tell you that the views online continue to grow. More and more people watching what we did, what you all did, and it really, Marcus, it seems like they always complain about the Kings, but all right, we'll have to deal with that. I look, it's not me, they get to write in comments, but amazingly powerful, and of course, the animals are an added touch, and everyone loves the animals, and especially the donkey. And I want to talk a little bit about when they were delivered on Christmas Eve. They were brought on Christmas Eve, and the couple that has the animals asked me if I would go out, and they wanted to show me the trailer they have, the carriage that they use to take people around. And they were leaving from us, going to another event, I think, in Brooklyn, and they were going to come back, to get the animals. And I noticed as I approached, their large trailer, that there was this horrible odor that came from that trailer. And as they said, "Oh, we can't wait to show you the carriage," as they opened the door, the waft of smell that came out of that trailer, literally took my breath away. And I remembered looking down and seeing all of the dung that was all over the base of the trailer, which makes absolute sense, right? They're transporting animals. It's just what it is. I'm sure they clean it every day, but today they've been running around, so here it is, right? All in its freshness, all spread out, and of course the smell. And I really could not get it out of my head on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day about the fact that the gospel writers wrote the story about Jesus' birth and that Jesus was born inside a stable. Now, historically, there's lots of arguments about what exactly was meant Some think it was a cave where they kept animals, and that's where the shepherd would lay in front of the entrance of the cave, and all the animals were in there. There's another that says it's an actual building, something, a structure much like this. Another says that, according to the traditions of the day, the way the houses were built was that the family would live upstairs, and that the animals would be down below, and that would be considered the stable. Whatever the case, and however it actually happened, the fact that the gospel writers wanted to recall the fact that Jesus was born in that stable just takes me away, because it is just not a good advertisement for this Messiah. It's not a good message. I mean, the child is born in and among dung. And the smell that I smelt on Christmas Eve must have been the smell that surrounded Mary, Joseph, and the baby. And when you buy a nativity scene, they don't sell you a little bag of dung to take home and add to it, right? They just don't do that, right? But yet at the same time, I'm not sure we're free to separate ourselves from the fact and the reality of what is being portrayed by the writers of the gospel, that Mary and Joseph were not welcomed anywhere and had to give birth to this child in a situation, in a setting that you simply is unmanageable for us here in the United States, for sure. But let's take it one step further. What does it say about a God who becomes human, takes our form, shares our human nature, and is willing to allow God's self to take this form and be born in a stable, surrounded by dung with such a smell, such an imperfect situation, a horrid situation? Mary could not have been happy about giving her child, bringing her child into the world in those settings. Look, as a young girl, she would have been part and inside the houses of many women who were giving birth. But all of those houses had fresh water. They had fresh linens. The Gospels make it clear that this Jesus is wrapped in swaddling cloths. These are the cloths that they use that when baby lambs are born. These are those cloths. They're animal cloths. They're not for human use. And yet that is all that is there. That's all that's available. And yet our God steps into this. And I think there's something to be said about us. We think we have to be a certain way. We have to be of a certain nature. We have to be of a certain religiosity. We have to be of a certain level of perfection that God could not possibly be at all interested in me because I don't this, I do that. We go on and on with our lists, and yet the gospel writers make it clear that this Jesus' entry into the world is in the deepest cesspool and squalor, and God, Mary and Joseph form this family unit there. And as much as it was disturbing to Mary, and look, no husband wants to go running around saying, oh, by the way, my kid was just born, in next to a bunch of sheep and cow dung. No husband wants to say that. What makes it acceptable? What makes it bearable for Mary and Joseph, their situation, their destitute situation, is the fact that Jesus is among them. Jesus is there. They know who this Jesus is. They know what and who this baby is. And having that baby in their presence, in their embrace, and being present to them, they probably totally missed the awful smells of where they were. They probably did not even pay attention to the fact that the baby was wrapped in cloths that would have been used for a lamb. They probably never even considered that, or thought worse of the fact that their baby had to lie in a manger. A manger, I mean, we become really comfortable with this, and every year, we come out, we set this up, we put it here. But we got to remember, this is where animals ate from. I mean, this ended up being his bed. I mean, the angels tell the shepherds to go look for the child lying in a manger. Now, if that wasn't a telling identity, well, let's keep walking around and until we find that kid laying in a manger. And sure enough, we run across a kid laying in a manger. Well, that must be the one. Why? Because it doesn't happen during that time. It just, no one would rightfully or wantfully put their child inside a manger, inside a trough where animals ate. And yet our God is not afraid of taking on human nature and going into the most destitute beginnings that any child would possibly want. And you and I still make excuses about the fact that we're not perfect enough, we're not holy enough, or what would God, what does God know about me? How does God possibly pay attention to me? And yet this scene yells over and over and over again to what length and depth and degree God will go to be with us. We continue our celebration of the birth of Jesus. As Christians, 2,000 years removed, we are a people who celebrate his incarnation and, of course, his death and his resurrection. And we hold those things inside ourselves. And all of those events teach us something. I think this lesson is worth a second look, because I think there's something profound here that I'm not even sure I'm touching upon, that God has been trying to say over and over again in every single nativity scene that is sold, in every nativity scene that's set up in a house. God is trying to say something over and over and over, and the invitation is made over and over and over again. If we could just get out of our own way, if we could just get out of our own way and just allow ourselves to be embraced by this act of love, I think our lives would be profoundly changed.